everyone, we create this video to make the explanation about consideration in law of contract. What is the consideration? From section 2 clause D, contract Act 1950 provide that when at the desire of the promisor, the promisee or any other person promise to do or abstain from doing something. In other words, consideration for a promise is the thing or action that the promisor wants in exchange for his willingness to make a promise. The Latin phrase for this is quid pro quo, that translates as this for that.
The consideration can be divided into three types. First, executory consideration. Second, executed consideration. And third, past consideration. Example of executory consideration: if I promise to sell you my bike for 300 ringgit, the consideration for my promise to sell my bike to you is your written promise to give me 300 ringgit, and the consideration for your promise to pay me 300 ringgit is my written promise to sell you the bike. This similarly, when I promise to pay you 30,000 ringgit if you design my house, we can assume as money for service. In this case, the appellant promised to pay respondent in return for the respondent application to convert and subdivide certain land to be developed into a housing estate. The exchange of mutual promise, though it is executory consideration, was good consideration. There was a binding contract. Executed consideration is a promise for an act. Executed consideration is a situation when A offered a reward to anyone who found and returned back his lost pet. B found and returns the pet to A and claimed for the reward. B has met the consideration when claimed for the reward, but not before A met the offer. These are money for performance. Past consideration is a promise subsequent to or in return for an act that has already been performed. Past consideration have two sections, section 2 clause D and section 26 clause B. In this case, Simit claimed payment as promised from a company to reward his service as an advanced engineer before and after the company was registered. The company claims that no consideration is given. The service after the company registered is a valid consideration under section 2 clause D. As you see that under section 26B, if A refuses to pay, B may sue for breach of contract. There is a voluntary consideration by B and he did the act for A. Past consideration have two positions. First, Malaysia. Malaysia state that past consideration is a good consideration. And second, English law. English law state that past consideration is not a good consideration. Plaintiff sued the defendant for breach of contract because in fact the horse was vicious. Plaintiff failed in his claim because under English law, past consideration is not a good consideration.
Rules of consideration. Consideration is made by parties in contract must follow the law. It has 7 parts of law. First, must be sufficient but need not be adequate. For the example, Peter's wife agrees to withdraw the suit she had filed against him in return for his promise to pay her a monthly maintenance amount. This is a good consideration and hold value in the eyes of law. Second, payment to compensate part of debt. For the example, Peter owes John 5,000 ringgit. J paid to John 1,000 ringgit and John accept them in satisfaction of his claim on Peter. This payment is a discharge of the whole claim. Third, not a moral obligation. Peter offered 10,000 ringgit to John to beat up his business rival. John beat up, but Peter refused to pay him. John cannot file a suit for recovery since the consideration is the law. 4. Not a public obligation. For the example, Peter received a summons from the court to appear as a witness for John. John promised to pay him 10,000 ringgit to appear in the court. This contract is not valid because Peter is obligated by law to appear in the court on receiving a summons. 5. Not a formal obligation through promisor. For the example, Peter sees that his neighbor's house is on fire. He immediately arranged for a water hose and managed to douse the fire, and he can claim any reward for his effort because it was a voluntary act. 6. Need not come from promisee. For the example, Peter gave his son Oliver an apartment and he must pay a fixed amount of money to his uncle John every year. However, Oliver failed to pay and John filed a suit for recovery. The last one is valid as to Section 24 Contract Act 1950. In Section 24 lists out 5 situations which if any of an agreement falls under, the agreement is void. The reason might be the object of agreement or the consideration of the agreement is unlawful.
Exception of consideration: lack consideration from one side of the parties to the agreement will not render the agreement to be void.
Under Section 26, Clause A, an agreement made on account of natural love and affection between parties. The requirement: the agreement must be in writing, the agreement must be registered, it must be made in account of natural love and affection between parties near related. The example case: father gave a car to his daughter. He signed the paper of the car on the name of his daughter. There is no consideration with the father. The father do because he loved their sons. The court held had a state not consideration with both of the parties. The section make the contract is valid. Under Section 26, Clause B, agreement to compensate for a past voluntarily act. The agreement should be a promise to compensate either wholly or partly to promisee. Promise did the act voluntarily. Under Section 26, Clause B, the promisor was legally compellable to do. The requirement is: number 1, the promisee has done the act voluntarily. Number 2, the act is one which the promisor was legally compellable to do. Third, an agreement to compensate wholly or partly the promise. Section 26, Clause C, pay a stated bar debt. A semi debt that cannot be recovered through legal action because lapse of time by fixed by law. Limit is 6 years from the times of course of actions. 9 Limitation Ordinance 1953.
Exceptions: there is a fresh promise made by the debtor to pay the stated bar debt after the lapse of 6 years. The promise is made in writing and signed by the person to be charged or authorized agent acting on his behalf.